Ladies and gentlemen, there are times in life when we feel alone, distant, as if everything around us is fading away and we are left in a space that feels empty. These moments can be confusing. Why do we experience seasons of isolation? Why, when we are striving, working, and seeking, do we sometimes find ourselves in situations where we feel abandoned or forgotten? But in reality, it is often during these seasons of isolation that God is preparing us for greater blessings. It's in those quiet, solitary moments that our faith is tested and strengthened. The truth is that before a new chapter of blessing can begin, there needs to be a process of purification and preparation. Just as a seed must be buried in the soil before it can sprout and grow into something beautiful, we too must sometimes be set apart in order to grow. God knows that the desires of our hearts, the blessings we long for, are often accompanied by greater responsibility. And in those moments when we feel isolated, He is teaching us valuable lessons that we could never learn if we were always surrounded by distractions and noise. Isolation is not a punishment, though it may feel like it at times. It is often a divine appointment. It is during those periods when we are left to stand on our own with nothing to lean on but our faith that we discover the true depths of who we are and what we're capable of. It is in the stillness that we come face to face with our weaknesses, but also with the strength that we never knew we had. It's a time when God can work in us, refining our character and shaping us into the person we need to be to receive the blessing He has in store for us. The process of isolation can feel uncomfortable. It's natural to desire comfort, companionship, and support from others. But there is something deeply personal that happens when we are forced to face our own hearts. We begin to ask ourselves the tough questions. Do I trust God completely? Am I prepared for the blessings I am asking for? Am I ready to handle what is coming my way? These are the questions that can only be answered in solitude. It is also in these times that we begin to understand the importance of patience. Often we pray for things, we work hard and within our timeline, but God's timing is always perfect. He knows that we are not yet ready for the fullness of the blessings we seek. He knows that we need to grow in wisdom, in humility, and in perseverance before we are entrusted with the next chapter of our lives. He is preparing us, molding us, and equipping us for what is ahead. Think of the great men and women of faith in history. Many of them went through seasons of isolation and testing before they were called to fulfill their purpose. They did not receive their blessings until they had been shaped and refined through their trials. These moments of solitude were not wasted. They were moments of growth and development. They were moments when God was building in them the strength they would need to endure and to lead others. This process can also teach us the importance of reliance on God alone. When we are isolated, we have no one but God to turn to. We cannot rely on others to fill the emptiness we feel. This forces us to draw closer to Him, to seek His presence more deeply, and to rely on His strength instead of our own. Through this, we learn that the blessings we desire are not meant to be self-sufficient, but rather to be a reflection of His grace and goodness. The blessings He gives are meant to strengthen us and prepare us to bless others. And while isolation may feel like a season of waiting, it's important to remember that God is always working, even when we cannot see it. He is always preparing us, building us, and aligning circumstances to bring about His will in our lives. The blessing may not come in the way we expect or when we expect it, but in due time we will see that everything that has happened during our time of isolation was part of His greater plan for our lives. So if you find yourself in a season of isolation, know this: it is not a sign of abandonment. It is a sign of preparation. The blessings that are coming your way are greater than you can imagine, but you must first be made ready to receive them. Trust in the process. Trust that during this time of solitude, God is working in you, shaping you, and preparing you for the incredible future He has in store. When the time is right, you will emerge from this season stronger, wiser, and more equipped than ever to receive the blessings He has prepared for you. Isolation often feels uncomfortable, even painful. When we find ourselves alone, separated from the things and people we've come to rely on, it's easy to wonder why. We question the silence, the loneliness, and the sense of being overlooked. Yet, in these very moments, God is often doing His most significant work in our lives. Isolation is not a sign that we are abandoned or forgotten. Rather, it is a divine process that is meant to prepare us for something greater. Just as a craftsman carefully molds and shapes raw materials into something of beauty and purpose, God uses times of isolation to refine us, to prepare us, and to equip us for the blessings that are ahead. When we are isolated, we are removed from the distractions of the world. In this space, we are forced to focus inward. It is here that we are confronted with the depths of our own hearts, the areas where we need healing, growth, and transformation. Without the noise of external influences, we can hear God's voice more clearly. In the quiet, He begins to reveal to us the areas of our lives that need attention. He shows us where we are strong and where we are weak. He helps us face the fears, insecurities, and struggles that we often try to hide from others and even from ourselves. In this way, isolation becomes a sacred time for personal growth. It allows us to reflect on our values, our purpose, and our priorities. We are able to ask ourselves the difficult questions. Do I truly trust God with my life? Am I ready for the blessings I am praying for? Do I have the character and the strength to handle what is coming next? These are the kinds of questions that can only be answered in solitude. It is in these moments that we are stripped of our self-sufficiency, forced to rely on God alone. And in this reliance, we begin to understand that the blessings God has for us are not simply for our benefit, but are also meant to be used for His glory and the good of others. But isolation doesn't just reveal our weaknesses, it also reveals our strengths. It is in the quiet moments, when we feel we have nothing left to give, that we discover the strength we never knew we had. God uses these seasons to build our resilience and perseverance. He allows us to face challenges that seem insurmountable so that we can learn how to overcome them with His help. In doing so, He prepares us for future obstacles and challenges, strengthening our faith and deepening our trust in His provision and guidance. One of the most profound aspects of isolation is that it is often during these times that we learn the importance of patience. We live in a fast-paced world where we expect instant results and quick gratification, but God's timeline is different from ours. He knows that we need time to grow, to heal, and to be shaped into the people we are meant to become. In isolation, we are taught to wait, not passively, but actively trusting that God is working even when we cannot see it. We learn to trust in His timing and to rest in the assurance that when the time is right, the blessings we've been waiting for will be revealed. Isolation also teaches us to value intimacy with God. When everything else is stripped away, all that remains is our relationship with Him. It is in these quiet moments that we learn to seek Him, not for what He can give us, but for who He is. We begin to see that the greatest blessing is not the material gifts we receive, but the deep connection we have with our Creator. Through this connection, we are strengthened, renewed, and equipped to face whatever lies ahead. As we go through seasons of isolation, it is important to remember that they are not permanent. Just as a seed must be buried in the soil before it can sprout and grow, there is a season of hiddenness before God reveals the fullness of his plans for us. In the same way, God uses isolation as a time of preparation for the blessings that are to come. The refining process may not always be easy, but it is essential for our growth and for the future God has designed for us. Though we may feel alone in these moments, we can take comfort in knowing that God is at work shaping us and preparing us for the greater things that lie ahead. When we experience isolation, we are often forced to face ourselves in ways that we might avoid during times of busyness or distraction. The absence of external noise creates a space where we cannot escape from our own thoughts, our insecurities, and our fears. In these moments, we confront parts of ourselves that we may not have fully acknowledged or dealt with before. It is in this solitude that we are given the opportunity to grow, to heal, and to become more fully the person we are meant to be. These moments of solitude are not wasted, even though they may feel uncomfortable or even painful. Isolation is like a refining process for the soul. Just as gold must be heated and purified to remove impurities, so too must our hearts and minds be purified. When we are isolated, we are removed from the influences and distractions that often cause us to operate from a place of insecurity or dependence on external validation. We can no longer hide behind the busyness of life or the approval of others. Instead, we are forced to deal with what is inside us: our doubts, our fears, our past hurts, and our aspirations. This process of facing our true selves can be uncomfortable, but it is essential for growth. Without this reflection, we may never fully understand the things that hold us back from stepping into the life and blessings that God has for us. In solitude, we are also given the space to build our inner strength. During periods of isolation, we learn to rely not on the support or approval of others, but on our own inner resilience. We begin to recognize that we are capable of handling challenges and facing fears that we might have previously thought impossible to overcome. It is in isolation that we learn what we are truly made of. We discover our capacity for endurance, courage, and faith when we have no one else to lean on but God. It is in these moments of quiet reflection that we are given the strength to stand firm in our beliefs, to trust in God's plan for our lives, and to keep moving forward despite obstacles. The growth that happens during these times is not always immediately visible to others. Just as a tree's roots grow deep underground before the branches can spread wide and bear fruit, our spiritual and emotional growth often occurs in private, unseen moments. While we may feel that we are being overlooked or forgotten in our isolation, God is at work beneath the surface, strengthening our roots. When the time comes, our growth will become evident, and we will be able to bear fruit that reflects the work God has done in us during this time of solitude. Another key aspect of growth in isolation is the opportunity to heal. Isolation often brings to the surface past wounds, unresolved hurts, and painful experiences that we may have tried to bury. These memories and emotions may feel overwhelming, but they are a vital part of our healing journey. When we are isolated, we are in a position to surrender these wounds to God, allowing Him to bring healing where there has been pain. Without isolation, we might never be able to address these deep hurts, and we would continue to carry them with us, affecting our relationships, decisions, and ability to fully step into the future God has planned for us. In solitude, we also gain clarity. It's easy to become clouded by the opinions and perspectives of others, but when we are alone, we have the opportunity to hear our own voice, to listen to our own thoughts, and to understand our own desires and needs. In this space, we can also hear God's voice more clearly, free from the noise of the world. It's in this solitude that we are able to understand what God is calling us to do, where He is leading us, and how we can align our lives with His purposes. This process of self-discovery and growth in isolation often sets the foundation for the kind of life we are called to live. The lessons we learn about ourselves, the healing that takes place, and the strength that is built in these moments are all part of God's preparation for the blessings He has in store for us. Without these seasons of isolation, we would not be equipped to handle the fullness of what God wants to pour into our lives. Though the growth may be slow and hidden at first, it is preparing us for a future that will be shaped by the lessons and strength we gain during these quiet, solitary moments. The work God does in us in isolation is not only for us, but also for those we will encounter along the way, as we are made ready to step into our purpose and fulfill the plans He has for us. Patience is often one of the hardest virtues to cultivate, especially in a world that thrives on instant gratification and constant movement. We want things to happen on our timeline, when we want them, how we want them. Yet when we go through periods of isolation, we are forced to confront the reality that not everything is within our control. The waiting that comes with isolation is not just about sitting idle. It is a purposeful and transformative process where we are taught the value of patience, trust, and God's perfect timing. In isolation, we can feel as though nothing is happening, as if everything has come to a standstill. This feeling of waiting can be frustrating. We may have desires and dreams that seem so close, yet feel unreachable, and we may wonder why things aren't moving faster. But during these times, we are learning one of the most important lessons in life, that God's timing is not like our own. While we may want things to happen according to our schedule, God knows the exact moment when we are truly ready to receive the blessing He has prepared for us. In many ways, isolation is a season where we are prepared for the next step in God's plan, even when we don't understand the timing. It's easy to look at the promises we've been given, the goals we've set, and think, why not now? Yet the waiting process is not about idleness, but about becoming prepared and equipped for what is to come. God, in His infinite wisdom, understands that the timing of the blessing is as important as the blessing itself. If we were to receive what we've prayed for too soon, we might not be ready for the responsibility, the growth, or the changes that come with it. Patience is not a passive waiting game. It's an active trust in God's ability to handle the details of our lives. It's in these waiting periods that we are called to deepen our faith and trust in His ability to work things out in His perfect way. While we wait, we are learning to release control and surrender our desires to God. We are called to trust that He knows what is best for us and that He will provide what we need at the right time. Through isolation, we are also reminded that the blessing we desire may not look like we imagine. Sometimes we think we know what is best for us, but God, with His infinite wisdom, sees the bigger picture. He knows what will truly bring us peace, joy, and fulfillment. In times of isolation, our patience is tested, but it is also refined. We are learning that our plans may not always align with God's, but His plans are always better and far more fulfilling than we could ever imagine. Furthermore, waiting teaches us perseverance. There is a strength that is built in the waiting, a resilience that forms within us as we continue to trust and remain faithful, even when the results seem delayed. The process of waiting strengthens our resolve, preparing us for the journey ahead. When we come out of isolation, we are not just receiving a blessing, we are stronger, more mature, and more equipped to handle the responsibilities that come with that blessing. The waiting has deepened our character, sharpened our skills, and expanded our capacity to handle the future God has for us. As we wait, we reflect on the many times He has provided in the past, the ways He has guided us through difficult times, and the promises He has kept. Our confidence in His ability to act on our behalf grows stronger the longer we trust in His timing. We learn that even in seasons of waiting, God is not absent. He is actively preparing us, aligning circumstances, and orchestrating events in ways we cannot see. In isolation, we are given the chance to learn how to wait with a sense of peace and contentment. Instead of becoming anxious or frustrated, we are encouraged to embrace the season of waiting as an opportunity to grow in patience. The waiting becomes a time to deepen our relationship with God, to refine our desires, and to align our hearts with His. Patience, as hard as it may be, is a powerful tool that shapes us into people who are able to handle the blessings we are being prepared for. When we learn to wait patiently, we begin to see that it's not just about receiving what we want, but becoming the kind of person who can appreciate and steward those blessings well. Patience teaches us to value the process, to understand that every moment of isolation, every day of waiting is working towards something greater. It is during this time of waiting that we grow not just in our ability to endure, but in our capacity to trust God fully with our future. And when the time comes, we will be ready not just to receive the blessing, but to handle it with the maturity, wisdom, and peace that only a season of waiting can bring. In times of isolation, when we find ourselves without the comfort and companionship of others, we are often led to a deeper and more intimate relationship with God. It is during these periods that we learn to rely on Him fully in ways we might not be able to when surrounded by distractions or other sources of support. We come to understand that our strength, our peace, and our sustenance are not rooted in the things around us, but in God alone. This deeper dependence on Him is one of the most significant lessons learned during seasons of isolation. It is through this process that we are reminded of the truth that we are not self-sufficient. We may turn to friends, family, or even material things to fill the voids in our lives. But isolation strips away these comforts, forcing us to confront the reality that only God can meet our deepest needs. At first, this might feel like a challenge, an uncomfortable truth that we may not want to face. But in that discomfort lies an opportunity for growth. We learn that while people can encourage us and help us, they cannot be the source of our true peace and fulfillment. Only God can provide that. In the absence of others, we are also given the chance to develop a more personal, intimate connection with our Creator. When everything else is stripped away, we have the space to draw closer to God, to seek Him more earnestly, and to listen for His voice. This intimacy is not a surface-level relationship, but one that grows deep as we depend on Him more fully. We begin to understand that God desires not just our external obedience, but our hearts. He wants us to know Him intimately, to experience His presence in a way that transcends the noise and chaos of life. In isolation, we also learn the importance of surrender. We are forced to let go of our own desires for control and submit ourselves fully to God's will. This is where true trust is cultivated. When we are isolated, we have no one but God to rely on. There is no other option but to turn to Him. It is in these moments that we realize how often we try to control our circumstances, only to see that true peace comes when we stop fighting and start trusting. Surrendering to God's will is not a sign of weakness, but of strength and wisdom. It is the moment when we realize that God's plans for us are better than anything we could have orchestrated on our own. Through this process of reliance, we begin to see how deeply God loves us. As we depend on Him more, we are reminded that He is always with us, even when we feel alone. His love is constant, unchanging, and unwavering. In isolation, we begin to experience this love on a deeper level because we are no longer distracted by the external forces that typically pull our attention away. God's presence becomes more tangible, and we come to understand that He is enough. We don't need to look to others or things to fill the voids in our hearts. His love is all sufficient. And through this knowledge, we are able to find peace, even in the most trying of circumstances. Another important aspect of relying on God during isolation is the lesson in humility. We are often forced to confront our own limitations during these seasons. We cannot do everything on our own, no matter how hard we try. In our dependence on God, we learn humility, the understanding that we are not in control of everything, that we are not self-sufficient, and that our need for Him is essential. This humility deepens our faith and trust as we recognize that our strength comes from Him and not from our own abilities. It shifts our perspective from one of self-reliance to one of grace-dependent living. As we grow in reliance on God, we also find that our capacity to serve others expands. When we know what it means to depend on God in isolation, we can better empathize with others who are going through similar struggles. We become more compassionate, more willing to offer the same grace and support that God has shown us. Our relationship with God transforms us, and this transformation, isolation, becomes not just a time of personal growth, but also a time where we are equipped to bless others in ways we could not have if we had not learned to rely on God fully. Ultimately, the process of learning to rely on God during isolation prepares us for the blessings ahead. When we can depend on Him fully, we are not only strengthened for the future, but we also position ourselves to steward the blessings God will pour into our lives. These blessings are not meant to be enjoyed in isolation, but to be shared with others. We learn that relying on God is not just for our own benefit, but to be a conduit of His love, grace, and provision to those around us. The more we lean on Him, the more we are equipped to bless and serve others in meaningful ways. It is through this reliance on God that we are truly prepared for the blessings He has in store. When we are in seasons of isolation, it can often feel like we are in a holding pattern, waiting for something to change or for the next chapter of our lives to unfold. We may feel disconnected from others, from our purpose, or from the world around us. But it's important to understand that these seasons are not wasted time. In fact, they are part of a greater plan that God is orchestrating in our lives. The isolation we experience is not just a pause. It is a divine process of preparation that shapes us for the blessings that lie ahead. While we may not always see it in the moment, everything that happens during this time is working towards something greater. God's plan for our lives is far bigger than anything we can see in our present circumstances. His vision for our future encompasses not just our individual needs, but also His will for the world around us. When we are in isolation, it's easy to focus on our own discomfort or our sense of longing. But the truth is that God is at work beneath the surface, aligning circumstances, building our character, and preparing us for what He has in store. This time of hiddenness and solitude is not a detour, but a necessary part of the journey. It is a season of growth that allows us to become the person we need to be in order to receive and steward the blessings that are coming. God's timing is always perfect, and while we may want to rush the process or get ahead of ourselves, He knows exactly when we are ready to handle the next step in our journey. Isolation is often a time of testing and refining, where we learn patience, develop resilience, and gain wisdom that we couldn't acquire in any other way. Thus, it's easy to think that we are missing out on something during these seasons, but in reality, God is positioning us for a future that will be more fulfilling and impactful than we can imagine. The blessings we desire may not come immediately, but they will come at the right time when we are fully prepared to receive them. In these quiet seasons, God is also working behind the scenes to prepare the people, places, and circumstances that will bring about His plan for our lives. We may not always understand why we are in isolation, but God is always at work, aligning everything for our good and His glory. What we perceive as a time of waiting or frustration is in fact a time of preparation. God is working in ways we can't see, setting up the pieces for the next chapter of our lives. The connections we need, the opportunities we seek, and the resources we require will all come together at the perfect moment. But they require this time of preparation first. The process of isolation also teaches us the importance of trusting God in the unknown. When we are isolated, we often cannot see what lies ahead or understand the purpose behind our circumstances. We are simply asked to trust that God knows the way. This requires faith, sometimes in its most raw and vulnerable form. But it is in these moments of uncertainty that our trust in God is deepened. As we continue to lean on Him and rely on His guidance, we begin to see that He has never left us, even in the darkest moments. We learn that we do not need to have all the answers. We simply need to trust that He is working things out on our behalf. Even though isolation can feel like a time of separation or distance from the life we want, it is often in these moments that God is refining our hearts and preparing us for a future that is more in line with His will. Through the quiet and solitude, He is aligning our desires with His, ensuring that we are ready not just for the blessings themselves, but for the responsibility and purpose that come with them. Blessings are not just gifts to be enjoyed. They are tools for fulfilling the greater mission God has for our lives. And if we are not prepared to handle the weight of those blessings, we might find ourselves overwhelmed or misdirected. It is during seasons of isolation that we also learn to appreciate the waiting, recognizing that it is in the waiting that God does His deepest work in us. We may feel as though we are stuck or in a holding pattern, but in reality, God is strengthening our character, expanding our faith, and making us more mature and capable of handling what is coming next. The longer we are in this time of preparation, the more we are refined, just as gold is refined through the fire. The impurities are removed, and the true value of who we are in Christ is brought to the surface. When the time comes for the blessings to be revealed, we will understand that this season of isolation was not a time of abandonment, but a time of preparation. The work God did in us during this time will equip us to fully embrace the next phase of our lives. We will be ready to receive His gifts with gratitude, humility, and a deep sense of purpose, knowing that the blessings were not just for our benefit, but for the greater good that God has called us to fulfill. The isolation we experienced was the very thing that positioned us for the abundant blessings God had in store. And when the blessings finally arrive, we will be able to step into them with confidence, knowing that we were made ready for this moment by the time spent in preparation. In the seasons of isolation, we may feel disconnected, uncertain, and even forgotten, but in reality, these times are God's way of preparing us for the abundant blessings He has in store. Isolation is not a punishment or a setback, but a divine opportunity for growth, refinement, and deepened faith. Through isolation, we are taught patience, dependence on God, personal growth, and the importance of His perfect timing. In the silence, God is molding us into the people we need to be, strengthening us for the greater things ahead. As we emerge from these seasons, we will see that the isolation was never in vain. Every moment of waiting, every challenge faced, and every lesson learned was part of a greater plan. God was using the quiet times to position us, not just for the blessings we sought, but for a life of purpose, service, and fulfillment. He knows exactly when we are ready, and when the time is right, His blessings will unfold in ways we never imagined. Trust that in your moments of isolation, God is at work. The blessings will come, and you will be more than ready to receive them. Trust His timing, embrace His process,